I heard her before I understood what I was hearing. It was the rotors, low and hard, and moving fast out of the southwest, and I was standing in the doorway of the field aid station at Fob Garin with my notebook in my hand, and a medic named Corporal Rains telling me to get down. I didn't get down. I watched the Apache cross the ridge above the valley at full tilt, running without lights, and I didn't know yet whose bird it was or why it was going in that direction when everything with a rotor at Fob Garin had been told to hold. I didn't know any of it yet. I just heard the rotors and I felt something shift in the air the way pressure shifts before a storm, and then the radio on Rains's belt crackled and a voice said, quietly and without drama, "Tango 7, this is Anvil Red. I have you on sensor. Coming in from the southwest. Call your friendlies." That was the first time I heard her voice. The briefing had happened 4 hours earlier, and I had not been in it. I got the account from Staff Sergeant Ike Morrow, her crew chief, a compact, careful man who had worked her aircraft for 11 months, and who told me the story standing next to FARP Pad 3 with his hands in his pockets, and his jaw set like he was still deciding whether to be angry or proud. He said he was mostly angry. The air coordination brief for the Grid Tango 7 operation was held in the main planning tent at 600. Primary close air support asset was a 2-ship element from the northern sector. She was on the slate as overflow standby crew, insurance in case the primary lost an aircraft to a mechanical before wheels up. That was the role. Standard. Nobody said it was disrespectful. But Morrow said she was mid-sentence when Brigadier General Dale Frost walked in and looked at the roster and said, without looking at her, "Overflow crew holds at the FARP. You're not primary. I don't need overflow in my briefing room taking up space the company commanders need." He said it the way you say something that isn't worth the energy of a raised voice. Then he turned back to the map. She closed her notebook. She picked up her helmet. She said, "Yes, sir," and walked out. Morrow said 2 company commanders were standing right there. Neither of them said anything. He said she didn't look back. He said her face, when she passed him in the doorway, told him exactly nothing. It was flat and composed and gave away less than the wall behind her. They sat on FARP Pad 3 for 4 hours. Morrow checked the aircraft twice. She sat in the cockpit with her kneeboard and her charts and did not talk much. He brought her coffee from the crew tent, and she said thank you, and that was about all the conversation they had. He said it wasn't a brooding silence. It was more like someone doing math. At 10:43, the first call came through on the battalion net. The 2-ship primary had taken ground fire on their initial pass over Tango 7. 1 aircraft was down. The crew was alive, extracted by their wingman, but the valley now had no air cover and the ground element, 3 companies, roughly 340 men working a cordon search through the lower district, was taking fire from 3 directions. The second ship, running alone, had taken a hit to the tail rotor assembly and was RTB. The battalion S3, a major named Cofield, was on the radio trying to reach the northern sector for any available asset. The northern sector had nothing for 40 minutes minimum. Morrow said she was already running pre-checks before Cofield finished the transmission. He said she didn't ask for clearance. She called the tower, stated her position and her intent, said, "Anvil Red is launching from FARP 3 to support Tango 7. Request immediate frequency handoff to battalion ground." And before the tower finished acknowledging, she was already pulling pitch. Grid Tango 7 was 11 kilometers southwest of Fob Garin. It is a valley, narrow, steep-sided, with a dry riverbed running its length and a settlement of maybe 60 stone structures on the eastern slope. 11 kilometers by air is nothing. She was over the valley in under 4 minutes. I know what happened next partly from the radio traffic and partly from the accounts of men on the ground who watched it from their fighting positions. Sergeant First Class Victor Ames, who commanded the northernmost element of the cordon, told me he heard her call sign on the net and thought it was a recording. He said no one had told them there was a standby asset. He said when she said, "I have you on sensor, call your friendlies," He almost dropped his radio. She ran the first gun pass at 10:51. The northern fire was coming from a ridgeline above Ames's position, a berm with good cover and at least 2 crew-served weapons. She came in low and fast from the east, turned the Apache into a 90-degree bank over the dry riverbed, and put her 30mm into the berm with the kind of precision that Ames described as like she was drawing a line. The crew-served weapons stopped. The second pass was at 10:59, the fire from the eastern slope. She came in from the north this time, following the contour of the ridge, and the battalion net registered her call-in before each pass. Tango 7 actual, Anvil red, second run, eastern reference, friendlies south of the market wall, confirm. And the confirmation came back and she ran it clean, and pulled up hard to the north and was already repositioning before the dust settled. She did not stop. I was at the aid station through all of it. I had my notebook open and I was supposed to be writing about the operation, the cordon, the companies, the mission objectives. I wrote 4 lines about the cordon. The rest of what I wrote that day was about sound. The sound of her aircraft repositioning after each pass, that hard, rhythmic chop going north, swinging, coming back. The sound of the radio. The sound of Major Cofield in the TOC 60 meters away, whose voice I could hear through the canvas, calling out her pass numbers. By the 5th pass, Cofield had stopped talking to anyone else on the net. He was just listening to her work. There is a specific kind of silence that happens in a firefight when the weight shifts. I have been in enough of them to recognize it, though I could never explain it in time for it to be useful. It is not quiet. There is still fire, still radio traffic, still men moving and calling, but something in the frequency of it changes. The urgency drops 1 register. Men start looking up instead of down. I felt it around the 6th pass. I know from the radio log that it was 12:18 when Ames came on the net and said, "Northern sector is clear." And I know it was 12:41 when the eastern slope went quiet for good. And I know it was 13:09 when the last of the 3 fire elements stopped engaging. What I know from standing in that doorway is that somewhere around the 6th or 7th pass, the medics stopped running. She ran 9 passes in 4 hours and 12 minutes. The weather over Tango 7 was not good, a crosswind off the highland plateau that pushed between 15 and 22 knots through the valley, variable and gusting, the kind of wind that makes precision gun work from a moving platform genuinely difficult. She did not miss a reference. She did not hit a friendly position. The confirmed enemy count from her 9 runs was 27. The 3 fire elements that had been pressing the cordon from 3 directions were suppressed, then neutralized, then silent. Extraction of the 340-man ground element began at 13:17 and was complete by 15:02. She landed back at FARP Pad 3 at 15:21 with enough fuel for approximately 8 minutes of additional flight time. Morrow was there when she set the aircraft down. He said she took off her helmet and set it on the seat and climbed down from the cockpit and walked around the nose of the aircraft and checked the airframe for damage. Methodical. He said she found 2 small arms hits on the lower fuselage that neither of them had noticed during the sortie, and she crouched down next to each one and looked at it carefully, the way a carpenter looks at a joint she's not satisfied with. Then she stood up and told him to get the aircraft into the maintenance bay and start the inspection process. He said he asked her if she was all right. She said yes, she was fine, and asked if there was any more coffee. The TOC debrief was at 1700. Major Cofield ran it. Brigadier General Frost was present. He had been in the TOC for the last 3 hours of the sortie, monitoring the net. Cofield read the flight log aloud. Launch time, grid, first contact with the ground element, 9 gun passes with timestamps and targets. Sortie duration, 4 hours and 12 minutes, confirmed enemy kills, 0 friendly casualties from air. Then he read one more line. He said the theater CAS record for longest solo close air support sortie under direct enemy fire had been set 14 months earlier at 4 hours and 1 minute. He said the log they were looking at was 4 hours and 12 minutes. Frost said nothing. Cofield set the log down on the table and looked at the general and waited. The room had 12 people in it. No one moved. Frost stood there with his hands at his sides and his jaw working, and after what I would estimate was 20 seconds, he sat down in his chair and folded his hands on the table in front of him and looked at the map on the far wall and said nothing further. I was in the back of the room. I had been let in as a courtesy, the way correspondents are sometimes let in when they've spent enough time on a post that the officers forget to exclude them. I had my notebook. I had been writing since the first pass. I had by that point 17 pages of notes about the sortie, the passes, the radio calls, the shifting sound of the firefight, the medics stopping their run. I looked at all of it and I drew a single line through the first 16.5 pages. What I kept was the last half page. It began with the moment I heard her voice on Raines's radio. "Tango 7, this is Anvil Red, I have you on sensor." And it ended with a single sentence about what I saw in the TOC when Cofield set the log down. A general, sitting quietly, looking at a map that no longer told him anything he didn't already know. I kept that half page, I have it still. She never raised her voice, not in the briefing tent doorway, not on the battalion net through 9 passes and 4 hours of direct fire, not in the TOC when Cofield read the log. I was present for the last 2 of those moments and I have the radio transcript for the middle one, and in none of it did she perform anything. No anger, no visible need for the room to register what she'd done. She drank her coffee at the FARP and checked her airframe and told Morrow to begin the inspection, and the valley was quiet, and 340 men were home. That was the story I had come to Garin to find, without knowing it. I had come to write about a battle. The battle turned out to be 9 passes and a half page of notes and a general looking at a map. I filed the story 3 days later. It ran without a photograph. The editors asked for one and I told them I didn't have one that was right. What I had was the half page and the memory of rotors in the dark going southwest toward a valley that wasn't going to hold without her. Some things you don't photograph. Some things you just carry.